Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. I think I froze up for a minute. Having a little bit of internet slowdown here, but the name of the session is CDFI Resiliency in the Midst of a Pandemic. Adina Abrowitz is the consultant that will be presenting this. Adina ran a CDFI in Camden, New Jersey from 1987 to 1996, and then worked at Opportunity Finance Network from 1996 to 2005. At OFN, Adina founded their consulting practice, organized the annual training conference, and implemented the virtual training center. In 2006, Adina founded Consulting for Change. It's a consulting practice specializing in maximizing the impact, market responsiveness, and efficiency of nonprofit organizations. In 2007, Adina deepened her specific expertise in relation to CDFIs, becoming an ARIS rater. In 2015 to 16, she helped ARIS develop standard impact measurement metrics for the CDFI industry. We're really pleased to have Adina with us today to present this session, and I'm going to turn it over to you now, Adina.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this session. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. So if you could turn to the next slide, please. So I am zooming in from Philadelphia, which I acknowledge is part of the homelands of the Lenape people. The Lenape people call their homeland Lenapoken, and they live here. They have lived here and they continue to live here for over 10,000 years, including the time prior to contact with white people and colonization. The Lenape signed the first written treaty with the newly formed United States of America on September 17th, 1778. And so they were also the first tribe to experience broken treaty promises. I have learned that the Lenape, like all Native Americans, are an amazingly resilient people. In the early 1800s, most of the Lenape were driven westward, yet some Lenape people remained in my area in secret. Children of the little-known Lenape European marriages of the 1700s stayed in their homelands, which were in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, northern Delaware, and southern New York, and continued to practice their traditions covertly. Hiding their heritage, they avoided discovery to practice their traditions. Hiding their heritage, they avoided discovery by both government and their neighbors for over 200 years. And it's only been in the last 15 or 20 years that these descendants have come forward to tell their story. I know that I have so much to learn from my Lenape neighbors. So I'd like to end this acknowledgement with something from my tradition, from the Jewish tradition, which is a blessing for washing your hands, which is a means of purification and acknowledgement. And I think that in this era of COVID-19, Jews have always done this pre-COVID-19, but in this era of COVID-19, it takes on a special significance. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to do this. So this is a special hand washing jug that most people who are observant would have in their house. And the blessing is in Hebrew, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Ruach HaOlam Asher Kichanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu Al Netilat Yadayim. Blessed are you, source of holiness, creator of all the worlds, who has made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to wash our hands. So thank you for indulging me while I did that. So let's put up the poll about who's in the audience, please. So if people could just click on what closest matches what role you play in your organization. And I only used CDFI people. I know there's a lot of funders and others here, but I apologize for that. So just put other if you're not in a CDFI. So if everybody could click who they are. Okay, so I'm depending on the people managing the poll to tell me when it's been mostly filled out, and then you can show the results.
We'll give about 10 more seconds.
Thank you.
Countdown 3, 2, 1.
Okay, now we're going to find out. Okay, we've got about almost 30% executive directors, and probably with the other directors, a third, and another same size chunk lenders, and then a smattering of other positions within CDFIs, and then 26% other, which are probably the funders and the government people and the bankers and so on. So thank you so much. You can close that now and put the next slide. So here's our agenda for today in terms of growing resilience, which is something we've all been doing and have to do and will continue to be doing during this time. I got this idea from a CDFI executive director during one of the first weeks of the pandemic. He said, first you have to put your own oxygen mask on, and then you put your oxygen mask on. You put the oxygen mask on the person sitting next to you. So first we have to take care of ourselves, which requires an amount of self-awareness, and then we can take care of others. But then we're going to talk about one method to build resilience, which I call business continuation planning. And then we'll have a conversation with 2 CDFI leaders on resilience challenges and opportunities. We'll be talking with Susan Hammond from 4 Directions, and we'll be talking with Janelle Yearout from NIMPU Fund. Unfortunately, Fern Ori, who was our 3rd panelist, couldn't make it today. And then we'll have a few final thoughts after that interesting conversation. Next slide, please. So first we have to put on our own oxygen mask. And I know it's often said, but we can't help anybody else without helping and taking care of ourselves. So I want to encourage you to put in the chat what ideas, what has been working for you in terms of your preferred method of self-care. What are some things you're doing to take care of yourself? And I encourage people to take a look at what people write in the chat. So I encourage you to do that as I speak. So, you know, we all have to overcome our own trauma and weakness in order to be effective and in order to be helpful to others. We all bring something to this work that in our background where we were hurt either systemically or by an individual. And that's ongoing work to get over that, and I acknowledge that. One of the things that I find helps a lot is a practice of gratitude. Trying to make sure that we do say thank you for the things that we do feel grateful for. Other people have other methods, other ideas that help them stay centered. But only once we do our own self-care can we help our organization, help your staff members to put their oxygen masks on, and then after that, perhaps our Native community. So we've got a whole lot of people who are getting out there walking, doing a morning run, staying safe, prayer, honoring some of your cravings. I can understand that. Burning cedar is very grounding for me. These are all wonderful things. I know for me, my religious community has always been important to me. Now it's even more so. So I'm kind of in amazement at how much that has become important to me, my prayer practice. Okay, next slide, please. Feel free to continue putting things in the chat if you wish. So the first thing to become more resilient is to be self-aware. And to be self-aware, we have to think about which CDFI skills in our organization that are missing, or maybe they're weaker than they could be, and that you want to strengthen them. And so no organization is equally good at everything. Every organization could get better at something. So when I think about CDFI skills, I think about money in and money out. So the money in includes raising money for capital, raising money for operations, managing the money, managing the covenants, talking to investors, managing the reporting that has to do with investments and with funders, doing those CDFI fund reports, all those kinds of things. And then the key skills related to money out are lending, portfolio management once we make the loans. It should also include marketing the programs, the various kinds of technical assistance and support that we give to our potential borrowers and our applicants and our borrowers after they make get the loans. All those things have to do with money out. And then of course, there's just the organizational skills of running your board of directors, making sure you have good budget practices and good HR practices. So in every one of those arenas, there might be things that you feel you do better or you feel you want to strengthen. So next slide, please. So please put in the chat from your own, as honestly as you feel comfortable, what required CDFI skill does your CDFI need to build or strengthen? What are some of those skills that you feel you wish were better in your CDFI, or you wish more people knew how to do them, or you wish your board members understood this, or whatever it is? Please try to put something in the chat. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, and hopefully people will put some things in the chat, or else maybe they're thinking of those things that are challenging. Communication, thinking outside the box. Yeah. I know for many, many, many CDFIs, financial management, really understanding what all the relationships are between this asset and this liability and this, if I take on this investment, how's that going to affect my whole organization? If these loans don't get paid back, how's that going to affect the whole financial statement? Those are areas that I think are very challenging to many CDFIs. Team building, we need more staff, but that means more grants, and thus more grants management, fundraising, financial projections. Yes, all those things are challenging. I need to get better at impact tracking. So feel free to continue putting things in the chat. So one resilience builder is business continuation planning. And business continuation planning is, some people get focused very much on succession planning, but this is broader than that. And the idea of it is to make the company secure. No matter who left, you would continue to operate without it being an emergency or without it being even a challenge. And that not just leave, but that a person could take a vacation, a person could take maternity leave, a staff person, without it being a big deal. And I know that just like other kinds of planning for challenging times, this is scary stuff, and most of us will put it off for as long as we can, but I guarantee you that spending a little bit of time on this will reap all sorts of benefits to your organization, both for the actual succession of a person leaving, or any other emergency event, or lots of other things will strengthen if you do this work. So we have some other things put in the chat. Working with people off reservation, board members need to see what we should be working on with small businesses, understanding the many hat aspect of employees, yes, understanding strengths and weaknesses, loan loss reserves. I wish we had the ability to help the community members who are truly helpless right now, yes, yes. Okay, next slide, please. So right now, whatever vulnerability or weakness in your CDFI system is probably being highlighted due to the COVID-19 emergency, because you're being asked to do new things. You're being asked to try to fill in gaps that didn't exist 3 months ago. You're being asked to stand up programs overnight. So all sorts of, whatever didn't work before is now like in neon lights. And depending on the size and complexity of your CDFI, different levels of business continuity planning might make sense or be possible. So I'm going to give you, no matter what size you are, a few tools that will help you, I believe. So meanwhile, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll get to them at different points in this presentation. So I think doing this will reap other benefits. It will give also people, junior people, the chance to test out some skills and grow, and give them the opportunity to try out new things. And you can find out what they're good at or what they're not as good at. It will make it easier for people to actually take their time off, and it will make broaden the public face of the company. In other words, the community people will know that there's more than just your executive director. The investors will know that there's more than the executive director, that there are more people in your organization, which will make you seem more, not only seem more robust, but be a more robust organization. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here's the steps for business continuity planning. First, you have to identify what are the vulnerabilities you want to look at and what do you want to work on. And then prioritize the most urgent ones. You don't have to fix them all right now. Then create a plan to fix them, which I'll explain how to do in a minute. Implement the plan, and then you rinse and repeat with the next level of vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. So I would say that vulnerabilities kind of come in two major categories. There's the expertise about having only one person, there's the vulnerability of only one person owning either a relationship or a skill. And then there's the vulnerability of having a process that only one person understands or it's not written down. So with the relationships, which relationships that are critical to your company, is there only one person who knows that person or that company? Like there's only one person that knows the CDFI fund contact, or there's only one person that knows the tribal chief. Those are vulnerabilities if that one person were not to be with the company anymore. In terms of expertise or process, what vital expertise or knowledge of how to do something at your company is owned by just one person. Only this person knows how to enter things in T. Only this person knows what loan loss reserve really is and how to calculate it. And also, what processes do you do over and over again, but they're not written down? So these are the two tools that are especially helpful in this work. Identifying the places where only one person in the organization knows something, and building in another person, that's number one. And the other thing is writing things down. This is super important, super not sexy work. Writing things down will help in so many other ways. Onboarding new employees, for example. It will also help you give better and more consistent service delivery. So these are things that we put off because they seem like they're luxuries, but they're really not. Next slide, please. So these are just some examples of what your top priorities might be, either in terms of relationships that only one person owns or expertise/process that only one person owns. You probably have others that you're thinking of. And I suggest picking one from each column and writing down a plan for how to fix it. Very simple plan that says, 1, who is the primary owner now? 2, who will become the secondary owner? In other words, let's say it's tribal officials. Who's the second person in the company, in addition to the executive director, that's going to have a relationship with the tribal official? 3, what are the 2 to 5 steps that you're going to do to bring that secondary person up to speed, and what is the time frame? So maybe you bring them along to meetings and let them shadow. Maybe you introduce them to certain people that are beyond just those tribal officials because they're critical to know. Maybe you give them files to read about meetings you've had in the past. Or maybe it's financial management systems. So you bring in a second person who begins to learn how to do these things. So write down the 2 to 5 steps to bringing the secondary person in, and what is the time frame? When are you going to do it? So just pick one from each column and focus on that. After you finish that, you can pick more. Pick another one. Okay, so next slide, please. So some ways that you might address these vulnerabilities. Some suggestions are, especially with the relationship, it's really important to share the background and any backstory with this relationship. Chances are there's a lot of history that needs to be shared. Begin to bring the person in on calls or meetings. When you're comfortable, have them become a backup. Let them take over less critical tasks, and be clear about the goal. Do you want to share the relationship, or do you want to completely transfer the relationship eventually? With expertise, shadowing and practice with staff member. That's one way to learn an expertise. You might go to training or do training online these days. And I encourage you to write things down, your policies, your procedures, your manuals, and develop and implement a regular schedule to update these policies, procedures, and manuals. Don't just do them once and you're done. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions. No questions. Okay, so feel free to put questions in the Q&A if anything's coming up that you're like, what is she talking about? Okay, next slide, please. So I'm very aware that if you're a small organization, the idea of building redundancies is very hard because you probably don't have you might not have more than one other staff person, or maybe you're even just the only staff person. So who else can help? So one possibility other than staff could be maybe you hire a consultant who works on this with you. Or maybe there's a board or committee member who could be sort of act almost like staff and be the second person. Maybe there's somebody who recently retired from staff. Maybe there's interns. And maybe you have other ideas. I encourage you to put other ideas of who could help you build your redundancies and your resiliencies in the chat. So what other ideas do you have about who could help? Any questions? I'm going to look at the Q&A. Colleagues can help by sharing. That's absolutely right. No questions. So feel free to continue to write questions if there are. Feel free to continue to write suggestions of who else could help. And then I'm going to ask for the next slide, please. Okay, so you've probably heard this expression that you never want to have a serious crisis go to waste. Crises create opportunities. And earlier today, I was in the networking session with a CDFI from Alaska that got a whole lot of funding from their, I believe, state to provide to businesses. Like, that's an opportunity that we haven't had before. States generally have not funded CDFIs that much. And so where all sorts of opportunities are coming our way during these challenging times, and we want to make sure that we don't waste these opportunities. Another quote that I really love is from Maya Angelou, and she says, "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style." So I think that's what we really want to do. In these times, it might feel like it's enough to survive, but I encourage you to think about how you and your organization could actually thrive. I realize this might seem ridiculous or presumptuous, but CDFIs are first responders in economic crises. Just like the fire people and the police might be first responders in certain ways, CDFIs are economic first responders. So in what ways, I hope you're thinking about in what ways can your CDFI move into or increase its role in helping your nation respond to the crises that we're facing today. And we're very fortunate to have two panelists with us today who's going to help us explore this further. So next slide, please. So we have Susan Hammond and Janelle Yearout. I hope that their mics are open now. So I'm going to ask, Susan, would you be willing to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Okay. So yes, I'm Susan Hammond. I'm the one of the co-founders and the executive director of Four Directions Development Corporation. And I am a Penobscot Nation citizen, and I've actually worked for my tribe, the Penobscot Nation, 10 years prior to Four Directions in various positions. The one prior to Four Directions, I was the Tribal Housing Authority executive director. I've also been a council member for 8 years for my tribe, and it was while I was a council member that I really gained a lot of insight into the needs and challenges of my community. And that has helped me in my position here at Four Directions and my relationships with my tribe. I do have a bachelor's degree in business administration, and I serve on the board of two main CDFIs. One is Mainstream Finance, the other is Coastal Enterprises Incorporated, or CEI, and also on a Maine Community Foundation, as well as two national Native CDFIs. One is USET, United Southeastern Tribes, and OESTA.
Thank you so much, Susan. And so we wanted to have one long-term CDFI and one relatively newer CDFI. So Janelle Yearout is going to represent that newer generation of Native CDFIs that are really exciting. So Janelle, can you please introduce yourself? Please unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so Tatsala, Oikalo inam himuma ka latiwa, inam wanik was, it's yaya palu, ka soyapo timki janal year out. In tiwatsa lapwe pa kinich, ka in was nimipu ka latama, ka apawe, ka palutspu ka kayus. So what I said was, good afternoon. Welcome to my friends and relatives here in the CDFI realm. My name is, my given name on my paternal side is from the Coyote. That's a Nimipu. And then my English name is Janelle Yearout. So I am Nez Perce. I live in Lapwai, and I descend from the Whitebird Band, Alpawe, Palouse, and Cayuse Nez Perce. So that's just a general introduction as far as what we do here at Nimipu. I've been with Nimipu Community Development Fund for 3.5 years now. It's gone by a lot of work since then. And within that time, we were under the Nez Perce tribe as a startup CDFI, well then emerging and then certified. And within this last year, a year ago, we separated from the tribe. So we're still fairly brand new within a growing stage. And so when Adina had asked me to present, I'm like, well, we're pretty new, we're still growing, but we still, you know, are impacted nonetheless within this realm. I served in different capacities. I actually left graduate school to take this position. My parents, so I guess I'm a child of political leaders. So I have a step parent and my dad and mother. My dad was chairman for 2 terms, and my mom was on council for several years. So understanding the political environment, we just had our elections and general council this last week. So we're still in the COVID realm with some cases, potentially new cases today. But we're thinking of everybody that's out there during this time, and especially reflecting on resiliency.
Thank you so much. So I know that all CDFIs have had to make adjustments and changes to their usual operations this year due to COVID-19. What is a way that your organization pivoted that turned out to be easier than you expected? Susan, can I ask you to answer that first?
Sure, yeah. I think while I was pondering this question, I think for us, it was just the remote connections that we had to enter into as a result of COVID, and how to maneuver and navigate through that, through making these remote connections, and you know, from a variety of levels, like my team having to work remotely and how to stay connected with them, the way that we serve our customers and our clients. A lot of it is one-on-one and in person. And then just our trainings, we've always done those in person as well. And then my board, having board meetings, and then our tribal partners. So there was that initial challenge of how do we stay connected. But in this now COVID world, everybody is becoming very comfortable with Zoom and connecting in that way, and knowing that they have to make changes and adapt. And so we've been able to use Zoom as a tool for connecting, where we may have never used that as a tool before in the past, but it's turning out to be a really great tool for us. We also use Microsoft Teams through our 360 Microsoft. Microsoft Chat, and I think one of the things that's really been so helpful for us in terms of doing this in a remote way is that it's not the ideal connection, but certainly it's better than just on the phone. And so we've been able to, through Zoom, share documents on screen, which is a really nice feature, still be able to participate and hear one another. And also, we used to have to travel to each of our tribal communities for those one-on-one in-person counseling sessions or doing the training. And so this has minimized our need to travel. And typically, our tribes are about, one tribe is very close, about 15 minutes away, but the other 4 communities that we serve are about 2 hours away. So it's often a 4-hour round trip when we do go into those communities. And so it's helped us in that regard. And that's just one example of how we've adapted where we thought it might be difficult to make those connections and maintain them, but it's been a little easier than we had originally thought it would be.
That's great. Thank you. I'm having similar experience of not having to travel. All of a sudden, I have more time that I can actually spend with clients and with in my relationships with people, which is a positive. Janelle, how about you? What was something where you had to pivot, your fund had to pivot, and it turned out to be easier than you expected?
So with our pivot, I mean, it echoes what Susan was talking about as far as transition to the remote work environment and virtual learning space. So we moved our team to remote, and our board was really supportive, given that, you know, one, the state and then our tribe also mandated a shutdown. So we converted to the remote workspace, but with CDFIs, that's kind of in practice anyway, with staff working remote. So that was easy to share. The one thing as far as just with our funding and grant requirements, like some of those objectives and our funders were pretty understanding with updating our grants. And so we're able to move that funding to unrestricted. And then also with fundraising, so when you're in a work environment, and especially on, you know, on tribal lands and in a rural area, broadband issues, and I had 5 kids at home, 3 were distant learning, and I had 2 toddlers. So it was quite a bit of work and juggling. And so that's like getting up at 5 and then working at 10 at night. And so your day just expands. And I didn't think I had as much time because juggling all those things. So, and then the internet issue was something for us. If the internet was down, and then we were down. So, and then we're trying to work from data. The other one is moving our clients to a virtual processing. Given the safety of everything and social distancing, the clients appreciated that. But there is a separate challenge as far as those who are not within that space, who are not banked, so we couldn't do ACH transfers, or who don't have access. The other piece was our strategic plan. So since we just separated this last June, we worked with Crystal Langholtz, OISTA, and Caleb Selby. And so we updated our strategic plan at the end of January, and then everything had hit. So we did a pivot, and we updated our plan to include COVID-19. What is that recovery going to look like for our communities, for our clients, and our small businesses? And then what does that mean for our CDFI, you know, with what benchmarks we have to meet? And so, I mean, of course, that holds my feet to the fire, but then there's some leniency there. So that's a pivot that we had meant. And then the other thing is, as far as looking for opportunities with grant applications. And so I was able to apply for over $100,000 worth of grants. There are little ones here and there, but we were pretty successful with getting those grants to help with our COVID response. Credit reporting, OISTA had a great webinar. I think Flo might have led that webinar about how you report during a disaster. So working with CBA and Down Home. And then also with the state nonprofit, we just looked at some webinars and trainings as far as what are those best things to pivot as a nonprofit, and then also as a small business. So I definitely agree with surrounding yourself with the smart people is the best thing to do, and then finding those resources. But it was a challenge. It's still a challenge.
It's a huge challenge. So Susan, I'm wondering, you talked mostly about the internal pivot. Was there a pivot you had to make with your customers and with the people the communities you serve?
We did. As most tribes, ours did a shutdown as well. They actually, it was a complete shutdown, and they wouldn't allow non-tribal members or non-residents onto the tribal community. So that was a significant challenge for us. And But we were, and it sort of hindered our ability to communicate, because we knew, in addition to the shutdown and not being able to go onto the reservation, the tribal employees were working remotely, and some of them within some of the different communities had different abilities to work remotely, because broadband is not as strong in some of our tribal communities, and so there were those challenges. And the communications slowed down within our tribe. So there was always sort of delayed communication. So it took a little longer to make some things happen. But we continue to work through that process. And a lot of what we do is continuing to maintain those strong tribal relationships. And so when we go into the community, we certainly meet with our clients and provide the training, but we also go out into the community and meet with those while we're there that may not necessarily be there for our services, but just so that we have a presence in those communities and they get to know who we are and all of the staffing. And so that was a bit of a challenge as well for us. And then we had some projects that were very specific with the tribes that required us to be in the community or to keep some things moving. For instance, we just entered into a relationship with one of our tribal communities to do a co-working space for an entrepreneurial center. And we were just getting that up and going. We had raised some funds to purchase some equipment for them, a copier, some workstations and computers, and to provide some training. And so we're continuing to do that, but it's at a much slower pace, and the timeline has been extended out to do that activity. And sometimes in some of our projects, we actually had to put them on hold. We also have, we're working on a home ownership cohort with one of our tribes, and part of that is to provide the home ownership home buyer education training, and we had put that in place. And then we had to, as a result of COVID, had to provide that training. We didn't want to slow it down, so we had to do a virtual training. And it's the home buyer education is very specific here in Maine, and there's certain modules and information that has to be shared, so we had to work with the state in order to put together a virtual training that met their guidelines as well as what we wanted to do for that training. So those were some of the challenges that we had, but we've continued to work through them, and so it is that sort of that connection that's just something that we have been trying to put a premium on doing going forward, as we know that this is going to be a long process and there's so much uncertainty, but the relationships are so key to how we provide services to the communities.
Absolutely. So did the people in the home ownership cohort stick with it? I know another client of mine in Appalachia and Kentucky has seen a big slowdown in their people coming in for home ownership counseling because of I think just because of the high level of uncertainty.
Actually, we've been really successful, and so they have stuck with it, and they've been very participatory, and so we've been really pleased that this hasn't slowed them down. We know that there will be some challenges in terms of once they get past this home buyer education training, that the next process for them will be to, if they're going to enter into purchasing a home, is to going out into the community and going into that real estate market and trying to maneuver and navigate through that process.
Great, thank you. So if people in the audience have questions, feel free to type that into the chat, and if we have time, we'll get to them. So my next question is, okay, that was the good pivot. What about the new environment has stressed your organization? What's been tough? Janelle, you want to go first on this one?
Sure, yeah. So the big thing, for us, given that we're a staff of 2, plus a volunteer. Our volunteers are at home, and they may be out indefinitely, just depending on the coronavirus. But with our community partners, given if they were furloughed or laid off, maybe they go find different positions, or their priorities may change as well as they're pivoting in this environment. So
Right.
maybe they're not doing financial education or business development services. They don't want to do that with their clients because they move to different things. So we're having to readjust to a virtual and then find other people who may want to pick this up. And so stressing the importance of the CDFI in our community is one thing. And so that the data from yesterday about the credit reporting is really important because we just started doing that this year. The other one is the capitalization strategy. So, you know, there may be opportunities, like I'd mentioned, applying for those different grants. Our primary source of operational funding comes from the tribe. And so I'm not sure, I'm sure other people may have seen on different webinars as far as tribal programs or gaming revenue funded programs also include some CDFIs, and that's how we're funded. So what is going to be the impact of that as far as when those revenues are down and funding for this next year or potentially the year after that? So that's what we're looking at and figuring out our strategy to fundraise and then also to provide services to tribal members in the community. So, you know, we need to figure out as far as what's going to be the best fit. And when we look at grant applications or for funders and investors, but then also to the tribe. So hopefully, you know, we can continue that relationship and the funding. We're still under the wing of the tribe, which is a good relationship to have. And so we're trying to manage and figure out how we can continue that support. The other one is supporting staff during this time. I mean, it's George and myself. So having to wear many hats and to, you know, address those needs, as I had mentioned, we launched an employee loan this last Thursday. So we're answering, my phone keeps beeping because those are inquiries and applications coming in. So we're processing loans, employee loans for people who have faced the coronavirus and who have, you know, accumulated debts. And so they're trying to get ahead of that. So those are some challenges and just, you know, restating the need to our community. And
yeah,
leadership.
I would imagine the need is, it's easier to make that claim now, to put that out, that there's a need for a CDFI today. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, the other thing too is small business support is because, you know, CDFIs are you know, we're small potatoes. So the Idaho pun is, you know, we're not an SBA lender. And so finding a PPP lender was a challenge. And then also to legitimize our small business community who maybe they don't have a banking relationship with the local lenders here. And so they had certain parameters on who was eligible to apply for PPP. But you know, what came out of that is OFN and then also TED with NNDF had made the connection with MOFI, Montana, Idaho.
Yeah.
So we got a few of our small businesses to apply for PPP through them. And we're successful. But as far as the rest of the process, you know, that relationship, we're looking at how we can support our small business community.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Susan, how about for you? What about the new environment was stressful for 4 Directions?
I think one of our first initial stress points was our portfolio and wondering how COVID might impact our borrowers, the ones who have loans with us. And so we actually have our loans serviced by a CDFI called FAHI. They're a large CDFI, and this is one of their fee-for-service that they offer other CDFIs as well as small community loan funds. So we've been having our loans serviced by them for a couple of years now, and we have a great relationship, and they have a good relationship with our borrowers as well. And it was a good match for us because they are a CDFI. They serve similar markets, you know, the low income, those distressed communities like ourselves. So their communication with our borrowers is always respectful and kind and compassionate, and we really appreciate that. And we notice that it makes a big difference. And so when COVID hit, and knowing that a lot of people were going to perhaps lose their job or have reduced hours, we were concerned that our borrowers would be significantly impacted. So we did contact FAHI immediately, and they were already responding. And we just let them know that we wanted to offer forbearance through the process, through a deferment of their loan we went with 90 days, but we were going to reassess, as well as a loan modification, so that at the end of the 90 days or the end of the forbearance period, there would not be a large amount of money that they would have to pay back at that point in time. So we knew right from the start we wanted to do loan modifications, and so that's what we put in place with FAHI. They created a checklist just to ask relevant questions. We knew we couldn't offer to everybody, so we wanted to make sure that there was a hardship, and so they processed those requests for us. And as it turned out, there was not as much as we thought there would be. We have right now 7 on our COVID forbearance list. They continue to make payment as they can, and currently 5 of them are current in their payments, and 2 are 30 days late. So it wasn't as big a hit to our portfolio as we thought, and to our borrowers. And so, but it will need to be monitored going forward to see, if there will be some long-range impacts because of the whole uncertainty.
That's very interesting, Susan. That's pretty much what I'm hearing from all my clients too, is that they offered the forbearance, but not as many people took it as they expected. And even the ones that took it, maybe they're doing interest only or partial principal. Very few wanted the full forbearance. So people are really, I think, doing their best and really trying to be, to stay as current as they can on their loans, which I think speaks to the relationship that we have with these people, that we're not just another bill that they have to pay. We actually have a relationship with them. Like you said, the FAHI people talk to them with compassion. I think that makes a big difference. So final question from me, and if people in the audience have questions, please put them up. So my final question is, what about new opportunities? Have you seen new opportunities due to the current situation, either of COVID-19 or the calls for greater racial justice? And what are you doing to position your organization in the short, medium term to take advantage of these new opportunities? So Susan, I'm going to ask you to go first this time.
Sure, and I'll just offer 2. The first one is we started looking at our loan products, and we wanted to have a loan product that might address some of the challenges that the people in our community might be facing, whether it's unemployment or reduced hours or an illness or whatever those challenges might be. So we created what we call our positive change loan, and it was something that we had piloted about 2 or 3 years ago. And once the pilot was completed, there were a number of challenges and issues that we had to address. So we put it aside for the time being, and there wasn't a lot of demand at that point in time back then. But we felt that we're starting to see some people asking us if we do have a small consumer loan for them to help them through this difficult time. So we resurrected our positive change loan, made some adjustments to it, and fast-tracked it through our process, and getting the board approval for it, and then being able to launch it in our communities to address the current needs. And so it's used in many ways that other small consumer loans are used, and it can be used for an apartment security deposit, car repair, any medical expenses, or even paying off some creditors. And just, we want to be creative and flexible And so that was one of the things that we implemented. Our board approved it at our June board meeting. And so we're hoping to launch that, and we have a dedicated funding source to use to deploy those loans.
That's great.
Yeah, that was one of them. And then the other unexpected opportunity came when our state wanted to create an economic recovery committee to address they wanted to be able to help create a recovery plan for the state of Maine to help put people back to work and make Maine a stronger economy in the long term. And so they established a committee and wanted to put experts and various industry sector representatives on the committee. And For Directions was invited to be on the committee and have a voice. And that's been really great because we can voice the challenges that our Native communities are facing, certainly pre-COVID, but also during and after going forward. And having a voice at the state level is something different and unusual for us. Often, many people in the state of Maine don't even realize that there are 4 tribes and 5 tribal communities here in Maine, and what those challenges are. And I have felt that they have been receptive and listening and wanting to incorporate some of the changes and address the things that we speak about.
That's fantastic, Susan. That really also reflects things I'm hearing from many CDFIs, that while during the Great Recession, CDFIs got recognition at the federal level. In this crisis, the federal level is kind of, honestly, somewhat ignoring us. But the state level, we're getting a lot more attention. And so it's really great to hear that Native CDFIs are part of that as well. How about for you, Janelle? What are some of the opportunities that you're looking at that you're hoping to take advantage of or are actually taking advantage of?
Sure, thanks, Adina. So with ours, in response and having that time, with the remote work is understanding the value of relationships and that face-to-face. And so we really had time, even as we reconnected and were able to come out, is recognizing the resiliency and the history of our people. That includes Indian humor, and finding ways on how we can overcome this. And my aunt shared some stories about the Spanish flu that her grandparents had endured. So my puch, they had to go through that. So talking about the haves and the have-nots and understanding that history, and then even up into the racial the divide as far as what this pandemic has elevated and demonstrates. And so we are working on ways to help our community in that way. I had mentioned the employee loan, but looking at our own process. So how we collect our data in Otis, how we reviewed our applications, as far as making it easier for people, and then leadership and how they can support. We also, I sat on, because we decided not to do small business grants at this time. So I sat in with the Lewis Clark Valley Chamber to create a resiliency fund for small businesses and a couple of our counties here. And so that provided an opportunity for those who did not access SBA funding or state funding. And so they were still able to apply for a grant that way. So we were able to steer people in that direction. The other piece is with CARES Act funding going to the tribes. And so we're helping define small business for the tribe. We're helping to map out the process and where, maybe where small business falls through the cracks. And so lining that up and then serving as a grant pass through and taking those applications. So that's coming up for us here soon. And so we'll be working with our tribe to provide those grants for small business support. The other one is conversations regionally. So we have a group, Northwest Native Lenders Network, and so that's the regional cohort here in the Northwest. And then we also talking with other funders and looking beyond as far as state boundaries, but looking at our historic boundaries, because you know our tribe used to cover just not Idaho, we included Oregon and Washington. So looking at those things as far as how we could partner and you know, capture that low-hanging fruit for now, but especially as a small CDFI, what can we do to make the best impacts, and then building for the future. So that's what we're working on as far as some opportunities that have come up. And we also helped with a recent celebration for Juneteenth this last weekend. And so that was talking about racial wealth divide, but also as the Black community, and then people who are mixed race to come through and talk about their experience. And so we provided some support for that group.
That's wonderful. That's great. So thank you to the panel. Does anybody in the audience want to ask a question? Please post right now in the Q&A or in the chat. So far I'm not seeing anything, but you have maybe 30 more seconds to put something up. I think they've been wonderful. If everybody could give them a round of applause and give them the Zoom thank yous, right? Thank you very much. Okay, so if you could put up my last slide. Thank you, Janelle and Susan. So this is just my last message that I wanted to share with people. This is kind of, I think that the more, even though it can be really hard during these times, the more we can come from a place of gratitude, the more we can experience abundance personally and professionally and as a group, and the more we can help our communities to thrive. And I know that might sound goofy or Pollyannish right now, but I encourage you to think about that. In my tradition, the way we express gratitude partially is through saying blessings like the one I did at the beginning. And there's a practice to try to say 100 blessings every day. You can say a blessing when you meet somebody who's very wise. You can say a blessing when you see something beautiful in nature, or when you, and certainly you're supposed to when you eat food. So there's all different ways that you can express gratitude. I know that's part of Native tradition as well. And I think when you do that, all sorts of good things come out of it, and make your organization, make your community more resilient, make your organization more resilient, make us think about opportunities that we can take advantage of during these challenging times. So I'll close with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adina and Jonelle and Susan. It was a great session, and it was nice to hear from everybody and share your stories. So with that, this closes this session for today, and I wanted to remind everybody that we do have another link for the next portion for the regional networking, and I did post it in the chat bar on your right-hand side of your screen, the new link. Also, you should have gotten an email with that link. So hopefully you guys will all transition from this Zoom link to the other one where we can have breakout rooms for the regional network session. And just thank you again, Adina, that was wonderful. And thank you everyone else for attending, and we'll see you at the next session.
Movie stars at Disneyland.